In quiet neighborhoods, power goes wrong.
At 2:17 a.m., the machines keeping my father alive went silent. No warning. No storm. No citywide outage. Just a click. And then the steady ICU monitor flatlined into darkness. Outside my window, one house still had power. The HOA president's house. That's when I realized this wasn't an accident. And by sunrise, a 30-foot generator truck would be parked in front of her house, making sure she never forgot what she did. My father had been moved home 2 weeks earlier. After months in a hospital ICU, doctors finally approved in-home critical care. Ventilator support. Cardiac monitor. Backup oxygen. Refrigerated medication. Our home had been professionally upgraded for medical compliance. Dedicated circuits. Battery backups. Automatic transfer switch. We did everything right. What we didn't plan for. The HOA. Her name was Denise. But everyone called her Karen. HOA president for 6 years. Obsessed with uniformity. Famous for sending violation letters over mailbox paint shades. 2 months before my dad came home, she tried to fine us over a small exterior modification, the emergency power inlet box required for the medical equipment. It was professionally installed. City permitted. Medically necessary. But she didn't like how it looked. It disrupts the aesthetic continuity of the neighborhood, she'd said. I showed her the permit paperwork. She said she'd review it. She never did. 3 days before the outage, we received a notice. Subject: unauthorized utility modifications. She claimed our external power system violated HOA guidelines. We replied with Medical Certification City Inspection Approval ADA Accommodation Request Federal Medical Exemption References. No response. Then, 2:17 a.m. happened. The ventilator alarm began screaming. Backup battery kicked in, but only for 20 minutes. The cardiac monitor dimmed. The oxygen compressor slowed. I ran to the breaker panel. Main breaker wasn't tripped. Streetlights were on. Neighbor homes glowing. Except ours. And then I saw it. The HOA-controlled neighborhood auxiliary cutoff box near the curb. Open. Our subdivision had a community-managed grid assist system installed years ago for uniform metering upgrades. The HOA technically couldn't cut individual homes. But they could request temporary service suspension for code violations through their contracted utility liaison. Guess who signed those requests? The HOA president. Guess whose house still had power? Hers. I called the power company emergency line. After verifying our account status, the technician paused. Sir, your service was flagged for compliance review by an HOA authorization request. My blood went cold. Can they do that? They can request inspection holds. But medical accounts are supposed to be protected. Protected. Supposed to be. Battery at 40%. My dad's oxygen levels dropping. Home nurse trying to manually stabilize flow. I didn't argue. I activated the plan I hoped I'd never need. 2 weeks earlier, after Karen's first threat, I signed a private emergency contract with a mobile medical power provider. Industrial-grade generator. Automatic deployment. Hospital-grade capacity. Because when someone threatens power to an ICU setup, you prepare. I made one call. Code phrase only. Deploy now. Headlights flooded the street. A diesel generator truck the size of a city bus rolled in. Loud. Bright. Unmissable. Neighbors' porch lights flicked on one by one. The truck positioned itself directly outside my house. Cables ran across the lawn to our inlet port. Within 90 seconds. Full power restored. Ventilator stabilized. Monitors lit back up. Oxygen compressor roared to life. My father's heart rate normalized. Inside our house, crisis over. Outside? Chaos was just beginning. Her upstairs window shifted. She was watching. The generator's engine vibrated through the pavement. Industrial noise. Continuous. Non-stop. Because medical-grade generators? They don't whisper. They hum like authority. Neighbors stepped outside in robes and jackets. Is the power out? Why is that truck here? Why is only one house dark? Because here's the twist. The utility company, after reviewing the improper suspension request, flagged the entire HOA account for compliance audit. Which meant the HOA's shared lighting system went offline pending review. Her decorative street lamps? Dark. Her fountain lighting? Gone. Her holiday uplighting? Dead. Only essential city power remained active. And everyone wanted answers. Karen knocked on my door. Pale. Tight smile. This truck is extremely disruptive to the neighborhood. I stared at her. You cut power to a ventilator. She blinked. I filed a compliance review. At 1:42 a.m.? Silence. She hadn't expected that timestamp. I handed her printed documentation. Medical exemption. ADA accommodation. Utility protection status. And the call log confirming her authorization request. Her hands shook slightly. This must be a misunderstanding. No, I said calmly. It's a paper trail. Because while my house had power again, the generator truck wasn't leaving. Not until utility formally reinstated protected status. HOA authorization privileges were suspended, written acknowledgement issued. And the power company? They were very interested in how a medical account had been interrupted. By sunrise, the entire neighborhood knew something wasn't right. The generator truck was still there. 30 feet long. Diesel engine humming steadily. Industrial cables running across my lawn. And Karen's decorative street lamps? Still dark. Neighbors were outside now, not in robes this time. Coffee cups. Phone cameras. Concerned faces. Because when a generator powerful enough to run a hospital wing shows up on a quiet suburban street, people ask questions. At 8:03 a.m., 2 marked utility vehicles pulled up. Clips boards. Tablets. High-visibility jackets. Not routine technicians. Compliance officers. They didn't even look at me first. They walked straight to the neighborhood utility control cabinet near the sidewalk. Unlocked it. Reviewed the override logs. And then one of them said something that made Karen visibly stiffen. Authorization request submitted at 1:42 a.m. HOA account credential used. Credential used. Not automated. Not system glitch. Manually initiated. One of the officers knocked on my door. Sir, is this a registered medical protected account? Yes. I handed him the documentation again. Ventilator certification. Critical care exemption. Emergency grid protection enrollment. He scanned it. Then looked at his tablet. Your account is marked Level 1 medical priority. It cannot be disconnected for compliance review without direct utility investigation. He paused. This request bypassed that process. Behind him, Karen was standing on her driveway. Watching. Frozen. One of the neighbors, Mark from 2 houses down, asked out loud. Wait, they shut off power to medical equipment? No one answered. But everyone heard. And that silence was loud. Because this wasn't about mailbox paint anymore. This wasn't about lawn height. This was life support. The compliance officer explained something most of us didn't know. When an HOA uses its authorization privileges improperly, the entire community grid management agreement can be suspended pending investigation. That's why. Street accent lighting was off, HOA managed fountain pumps were disabled, common area irrigation timers were inactive. The HOA's utility privileges were frozen. Not just my house. Her authority. This time, it wasn't Karen. It was the HOA property management rep. Nervous. Sweating. He asked if we could de-escalate the situation. I gestured toward the generator truck. This is de-escalation. Because here's what they didn't understand. That generator wasn't revenge. It was documentation. Proof that we had to bypass the HOA's interference to protect a critical medical system. And the utility company was documenting everything. By noon, a supervisor from the utility company arrived. He spoke carefully. Interference with registered medical protected accounts can fall under serious regulatory violations. He didn't say the word illegal. He didn't need to. Karen's face had lost all color. She tried one last angle. I was enforcing neighborhood standards. The supervisor looked at her calmly. At 1:42 in the morning? Silence again. That timestamp was destroying her. By late afternoon, an emergency HOA meeting was announced. Attendance was the highest in years. Not because of landscaping. Because people were scared. If power could be cut for a dispute over aesthetics, what else could happen? Karen tried to control the narrative. It was a procedural review. I stood up. Procedural reviews don't trigger ventilator alarms. The room went very still. I displayed the HOA violation notice, our medical exemption response, the timestamped authorization request, the utility compliance policy. Then I showed something else. The contract for the generator service. Cost per day. $4,800. Whispers spread. Because if this escalated, the HOA insurance carrier would be involved. And insurance companies ask hard questions. A retired attorney who lived on our street raised his hand. Was there board approval for this power suspension request? Karen hesitated. No, emergency authority allows. He cut her off. Emergency authority applies to safety threats. A permitted medical inlet box is not a safety threat. The board members beside her shifted uncomfortably. Because they hadn't known. She acted alone. That night, the generator continued running. Not because we needed drama, but because we needed proof of necessity until the utility company completed its review. And the noise? Constant reminder. Every vibration in the pavement echoed one truth. Authority has limits. The next morning, the utility company formally suspended HOA authorization privileges pending investigation. Translation? The HOA could no longer submit compliance-related utility requests, modify shared grid permissions, influence individual property utility status. Karen's primary enforcement leverage? Gone. And she knew it. Late afternoon, as the generator tech prepared to disconnect after formal reinstatement, Karen walked over. She looked smaller. Not physically, but socially. Can we resolve this privately? I looked at the truck. At the compliance officers. At the neighbors watching from porches. This stopped being private at 2:17 a.m. Her hands tightened. Because she understood. This wasn't about noise complaints anymore. It was about misuse of power, literal and administrative. The generator truck would leave. But the audit? That was just beginning. And once regulators, insurance carriers, and homeowners start asking questions, paper trails turn into consequences. When the generator truck finally powered down, the silence felt different. Not fragile. Not uncertain. Stable. Utility power had been formally restored under medical protected status. Our account was reclassified with a non-interruptible flag. Any future request would now require direct utility supervisor approval. In other words, no HOA shortcut would ever touch our line again. But while my father rested peacefully inside, the neighborhood was anything but calm. 3 days later, every homeowner received a notice. Not from the HOA. From the HOA's insurance carrier. Subject: Incident Review, Utility Interruption. That's when people realized this wasn't just drama. It was liability. The letter confirmed. An internal review had been opened, the generator deployment cost had been reported, legal exposure was being evaluated. And once insurance companies get involved, they don't protect pride. They protect risk. At the emergency board session that week, tension filled the clubhouse. 2 board members looked blindsided. Because they were. Karen had submitted the 1:42 a.m. authorization alone. No vote. No documentation of emergency threat. No legal review. One board member asked quietly, "Why didn't you tell us it was a medical property?" Karen's response was barely audible. "I didn't think it mattered." The room shifted. Because that sentence changed everything. A neighbor who worked in compliance stood up. Interfering with a documented medical protected utility account can expose the association to federal discrimination claims. You could feel the temperature drop. This wasn't a fine. This wasn't a landscaping violation. This was potential regulatory action. And regulatory action doesn't stay inside a neighborhood. Within 48 hours, a removal petition circulated. It only needed 2/3 support. It got more. Not because people hated Karen, but because they feared what unchecked authority could do next. When power over aesthetics turns into power over oxygen, trust breaks. The clubhouse was standing room only. Karen sat at the front table she'd occupied for 6 years. Calm face. Tight posture. Votes were cast anonymously. Collected. Counted twice. The result? Removal approved. Effective immediately. No applause. No cheering. Just a quiet exhale across the room. After the meeting, she walked out alone. Streetlights were back on. Fountain running again. But something had shifted permanently. Authority built on intimidation doesn't survive exposure. And once neighbors see the paper trail, they don't unsee it. Inside our home, none of that politics mattered as much as one simple thing. The ventilator continued its steady rhythm. The cardiac monitor glowed softly. The oxygen compressor hummed without interruption. Because that's what this was always about. Not revenge. Not drama. Reliability. When you bring ICU-level care home, you don't gamble on assumptions. You prepare for worst-case scenarios. And sometimes, the worst case wears a clipboard and calls it compliance. 2 weeks later, the utility company closed its investigation. Findings: HOA authorization privileges reinstated, with restrictions, mandatory compliance training for board members, medical protected accounts placed under enhanced oversight. Translation: Karen's 1:42 a.m. shortcut permanently changed the HOA's authority structure. One afternoon, one of the former board members knocked on my door. Not defensive. Not confrontational. Just honest. We should have double-checked before letting one person hold that much power. I nodded. Systems matter more than personalities. Because this wasn't about one woman. It was about unchecked process. The neighborhood feels different now. More careful. More transparent. Meeting agendas are detailed. Utility discussions require full board approval. Medical accommodation policies are written clearly into HOA guidelines. And most importantly, No one touches protected accounts without legal verification. When Karen shut down our power, she thought she was enforcing uniformity. She forgot something critical. Uniform rules don't override medical necessity. And paperwork doesn't erase federal protection. The generator truck didn't just power a house. It powered accountability. That low industrial hum echoing through the street? It was the sound of authority hitting its limit. At 2:17 a.m., machines went silent. At 2:45 a.m., a diesel engine roared to life. Between those two moments was a decision someone made casually. And a response someone made carefully. Power isn't just electricity. It's responsibility. And when someone misuses it, whether through wires or bylaws, consequences follow. Not loudly. Not dramatically. But definitively. My father sleeps peacefully now. The monitors glow steadily. And every time the lights flick on without hesitation, I'm reminded. Preparation beats intimidation. Every time.